The Neo Geo was an absolute powerhouse of a console in the home back in the day, but the console had a tough start in life. The first batch of games were not the best, and most, if not all of them, were deemed too easy to beat. At £200 for each game, it just made more sense to spend more money on the arcade to beat it. It would certainly be cheaper, that's for sure. By the time of the second wave of games for the Neo Geo, SNK had gotten their act together. They had started to produce games that actually looked like a proper arcade game, and also provided enough of a challenge to maybe justify the extremely expensive price tag. But was SNK's marketing strategy right? They had already released a one-on-one versus fighter in 1991 with Fatal Fury, and not even a year later, SNK released this huge game, Art of Fighting. The reason I ask about the marketing strategy is because of one fact. Software houses of that time would not normally release too many games of a similar style in such quick succession, and many gamers were wondering if Art of Fighting was the replacement for Fatal Fury. Well, it wasn't. But it was part of a much larger plan by SNK. But more of that later. And what is it exactly about Art of Fighting that makes it special? Well, it was a first in many areas on the Neo Geo. It was the first 100 mega plus size cartridge, at 102 meg to be exact. It was the largest cartridge produced for the Neo Geo up to that point. It was also the first game that made proper use of the sprite scaling technology on the Neo Geo. In Fatal Fury, the sprite got smaller if they moved into the background and larger when returning to the foreground. In Art of Fighting, the camera zooms in and out. When the fighters get close, the camera zooms in and zooms out when they're far apart. And this sprite scaling is a lot smoother with the addition of extra memory. This was also the first Neo Geo game to feature absolutely colossally huge screen-filling sprites. When you seen this game in the arcades, you were left in awe at the size of them. I had never seen sprites as large as this on a game before. It was also the first SNK fighter to use a spirit gauge. When the characters perform special techniques, their spirit gauge is depleted and their special attacks become weaker. Players can also drain their opponent's spirit gauge by taunting them. And yet, another first was visible damage to the fighter's face. During the bout, each fighter's face would start to get puffy and swollen to show the beating they had taken. The visuals are the standout feature of this game. I mean, just look at the size of these characters. And it's not just the size of them, it's the amount of detail in there as well. It's easy to hide a lack of animation or detail in small sprites, but on huge sprites, it's impossible. And the graphics team at SNK have hit this one right out the park. Art of Fighting is a truly stunning game to look at, especially for the time it was around in the early 1990s. But there are some things that do not look quite right. Ryo's flying uppercut looks a little on the cheap side, as he just floats up and down, with very little in the way of animation. Some of the backgrounds do lack animation, and so they look very static. You do get the occasional flashing light, but on the whole, they do let the side down a little. But let's not get fussy. Who looks at the backgrounds during a fight anyway?
Final round. Fight!
The sound in the game has this familiar SNK sound and feel to it. The sound effects are loud, and as usual in SNK games now, the sound when you hit the deck is loud, booming, and just awesome sounding. The sounds of the punches and kicks are superb as well. It can make you flinch or wince in pain at times. The music is another mix of metal and guitar riffs, with some other tunes sounding a little Black Rain inspired, with some good use of synth, and overall, the music in the game is good. There is a ton of speech in the game, which by now was becoming an SNK signature, and this announcer of the fight locations sounds identical to the one in Fatal Fury, and all of it is really clear. The gameplay at first comes across as taking a step backwards. You can only play the single player as one of two fighters, but in the two player you can select pretty much anyone in the game. But once the two player bout is over, you can't keep using that fighter. You have to select one of the original two characters. Ryo, who looks like a blatant Ken ripoff, and Robert, who reminds me of Terry Silver from the Karate Kid 3 movie. But both fighters are not just merely the same character with a different suit on. Each one has a different style of fighting. The moves are executed using similar mechanics to Fatal Fury, but Art of Fighting has a more complicated move assignment, and so it takes a bit of getting used to. You also have this spirit gauge, which will reduce each time you use a special attack, and in order to refill it, you need to hold down all the buttons, but this leaves you vulnerable to attack, and so use of special moves needs to be done sparingly. This adds a new element of strategy to the fighting, and again, it's not something that is easy to pick up, but you do get used to it the more you play.
One, fight!
Much like Fatal Fury, the game is story driven, and the plot of the game is revealed as you progress through the game. But that won't be easy, as Art of Fighting is not a game for the casual gamer. The fighting is very tough, and the game packs a seriously hefty challenge. But if you do persevere, you do get your just rewards. In the UK, this game was featured very heavily on a video game show on Sky One called Games World. And it's no wonder the visuals of the game looked out of this world, and it had a very impressive quality to it. It's exactly the type of game you would want to have on your TV show. And when compared to other home fighters like Street Fighter 2 on the Super NES or the Mega Drive, Art of Fighting blew them both away. This was where I seen it for the first time, on the TV, and while visually it looked brilliant, I wasn't convinced it would play any better than Street Fighter 2, and I still think that to this day. It's a good game, but there are better options out there. I even feel that Fatal Fury is a better game to play than Art of Fighting, but I still on occasion have a go on this, and I still find it tough. Possibly the best thing about Art of Fighting was the amount of talk it generated in school playgrounds and arcades up and down the land. This was the first time I ever remember that people were speaking about the possibility of a crossover of this and Fatal Fury. The only reason for this talk was because they were both made by SNK, and they were both set in the same time period roughly. And it seems like this was a plan all along for SNK, as only a year later, Ryo appeared in another SNK fighter as a secret boss, and even as a selectable hidden character. So that SNK marketing department had gotten their strategy right all along. But at that time, nobody was to know what much larger things Ryo and Robert would have in store for them. Art of Fighting was a groundbreaker for SNK. It started to allow the Neo Geo to flex its muscles. It laid the groundwork for the crossover franchise. It showed that strategy could play an important role in fighting games. And it really let the world know that the Neo Geo was here to stay, and that SNK would prove to be worthy opponents to the monopoly of Capcom's Street Fighter 2. It's a game I don't own. I never enjoyed it that much to go out and buy it, and to be honest, it's not even a game I really would have bought had I seen it cheap enough. But when you start to sort through its history and discover that Art of Fighting was a game that sowed the roots of something far larger and more successful for SNK, then you have to doff your cap to it and give it the recognition it deserves. And that is why I have included it in this series of videos. Well, that, and the fact my old schoolmate always had a problem saying its name correctly. To him, it was Art of Farting, and so every time I play this game, I remember him always calling it that and laughing. Those classic old school memories, eh? And that was my look back at Art of Fighting. If you liked this video, then please do give me a sub and a thumbs up, or maybe even a comment or two below about your memories of Art of Fighting on any format. And a massive thank you to all those who have subscribed and commented on my channel. Your feedback, comments and support really do go a long way in helping the channel grow, and I do appreciate all of the support. So it's a massive thank you from me. And that's all from me, folks. Thanks for watching.